By 1998, Russian scientists had pulled a sample from behind a wall panel inside the Mir space station.
For that demonstration,
Great, okay, I'm in. We can see that.
What they found was a floating ball of water about the size of a grapefruit, growing E. coli, Legionella, dust mites, and protozoa. It had been drifting in the dark behind the wiring. Cosmonauts had been brushing past it, sleeping next to it, breathing the same air. By the late 1990s, Mir was supposed to have been retired almost a decade earlier. Built to last 5 years, it had been in orbit for 12. The cooling pipes had developed thousands of microscopic leaks, too small and too numerous to repair, so coolant was constantly seeping into the air.
And his face goes whoosh right into this basketball-sized, globule of antifreeze, which just coats him, just everything all over his face.
Mold was eating the cabling. The walls were warm to the touch and humid, like a basement after a flood. And inside that basement, 3 men still had to wake up every morning, eat breakfast, do their jobs, and try to keep the whole thing from killing them. This is what daily life on a dying space station actually looked like. A typical day on Mir was scheduled by ground control down to 5-minute blocks. Wake-up came at 7 in the morning Moscow time, broadcast through the station's speakers.
The entire time, it feels like the space station itself is falling.
The crew slept in 2 narrow compartments called kayutkas, each one about the size of an upright phone booth, set into the rear of the core module. Inside each closet was a sleeping bag tethered to the wall, a small porthole, a fan, and a few photos from home. You could hook your bag to the floor, the ceiling, or sideways. There was no up or down anyway. The fan was not optional. Warm air does not rise in zero gravity, which means a sleeping cosmonaut would slowly form a bubble of his own exhaled carbon dioxide around his face.
If you're not getting a good night's sleep, you can count on reduced cognitive function.
Anyone who picked a quiet corner without airflow woke up gasping with a splitting headache, so they chose noise instead. A space station full of fans, pumps, and filters sounded like sleeping inside a vacuum cleaner. Most learned to like it. The constant hum was the sound of being kept alive. Hygiene took longer than it sounds. Mir originally had a shower in the Covant 2 module called the Banya, but it was such a hassle to set up and clean afterward that crews mostly stopped using it. Eventually, it was converted into a steam room. Eventually, it was just storage. So cosmonauts clean themselves the way they clean themselves on the International Space Station today, with damp towels, rinseless shampoo, and a soap that came out of something resembling a toothpaste tube.
Well, let's talk about how to brush your teeth in space.
The toothpaste itself was edible. There was nowhere to spit. Then came the toilet, which worked by suction.
For the toilet, and the solid waste goes into this container.
You strapped your legs in, aimed carefully, and let the fans do the rest. When the power failed, which happened often, the crew had to fall back on plastic bags. Cosmonauts later said morale on the station could be measured pretty accurately by whether the toilet was working that week.
We would show you a little bit about some meal.
Breakfast was canned and labeled in Cyrillic, with options like beef tongue, buckwheat, and curd cheese with sea buckthorn fruit. Soups and juices came in toothpaste tubes you squeezed straight into your mouth, because a floating drop of borscht in zero gravity is not a stain problem, it's an electrical problem. The galley in the core module had a small heater built into the table. You stuck the can in, waited for it to warm, and ate with a magnetized spoon so the spoon didn't drift off mid-meal. Doctors had also approved cognac in the early years, officially as an immune booster. Cosmonaut Alexander Lazutkin later confirmed they used it exactly the way you would expect. After breakfast came 2 hours of mandatory exercise, because a body in microgravity starts losing bone density and muscle mass within days. Then experiments, then maintenance, then more maintenance, because by the late 1990s, maintenance was the job. If you have ever lived in an old apartment, you know the feeling of something always being broken. Mir was that, in space, with consequences. Computers crashed. The station would lose attitude control and start tumbling slowly through orbit. Pipes leaked, panels rattled. Behind the walls, where almost no one looked, the mold was spreading. By the time Mir was decommissioned, scientists had identified roughly 140 different species of microorganisms living inside it, some producing acids that ate metal and glass. One window was being slowly consumed from the outside by a fungus that had hitched a ride up on the cosmonauts themselves, and the master alarm went off 4 or 5 times a day. That last detail mattered more than it sounds. American astronaut Jerry Lininger arrived on Mir in January 1997, and within weeks he noticed his Russian crewmates barely flinched when the alarm rang. They had been desensitized.
And the other Soyuz was on the other side where Progress is now docked.
Most alerts were nothing. A bad sensor, a stuck pump. Until February 23rd, when cosmonaut Alexander Lazutkin loaded a fresh oxygen-generating canister into a unit in the Kvant-1 module, and the canister erupted into a 3-foot blowtorch of flame and molten metal. Smoke filled the station in under a minute. Some of the gas masks didn't work. Some of the fire extinguishers were strapped to the wall too tightly to pull free. The flames blocked the route to one of the 2 escape capsules. Officially, the fire lasted 90 seconds. Lininger, who was there, says it lasted 14 minutes. If you've made it this far, you already know this is the kind of story we keep telling on this channel. If you want more like it, hit subscribe. 4 months later, in June, cosmonaut Vasily Tsabliev was running a manual docking test with an uncrewed cargo ship called Progress M34. He was steering it with joysticks, eyeballing it on a video screen, with no telemetry to back him up. He miscalculated the cargo ship's mass. It came in too fast. It tore through a solar array and punched a hole in the Spektr module. Sirens went off. The pressure started dropping. The crew sealed the hatch to Spektr.
In 23 minutes, if we did nothing, we would start to go unconscious.
Abandoning a third of the station and roughly half the electrical power, and waited in the Soyuz capsule to see if they would have to evacuate. They didn't. They stayed. They kept eating from cans, sleeping in closets, brushing their teeth with edible paste, and showing up for their 5-minute scheduling blocks. For the next 4 years, until the station was finally deorbited over the Pacific in March 2001, Mir kept flying, held together by patches, duct tape, and a Russian engineering tradition that said, the way you survive a problem is by not panicking about it. That, more than the food or the sleeping bags or the suction toilet, is the thing the early space stations actually taught us. The hardest part of living in space is not the science. It is staying calm inside a machine that is quietly trying to kill you, day after day, while you eat your breakfast. So here's the question. Could you have done it? Tube of borscht for breakfast, mold in the walls, alarms every few hours, and 14 minutes of fire between you and the only way home. Let me know in the comments.